Hello and welcome to the Toolkit for Traders YouTube channel where we give you the tools for trading success. And we're on to the 8th episode in our Coding in MQL5 programming tutorial series, so let's get started. So the big one, we're on to technical indicators in episode 8. So what we'll be looking at, we'll be looking at how to use pre-built indicators initially, how to use those in our EA, use the inputs to make the EA customizable, and we'll be changing the EA that we've been building to respond to data from our indicator. So, quote for this lesson: I always laugh at people who say, I've never met a rich technician. I love that. It's such an arrogant, nonsensical response. I used fundamentals for 9 years and got rich as a technician. Marty Schwartz, very famous technical trader. Technical analysis is a big part of trading and it's an important one. So when we're building our expert advisors, we need to know how we're going to use expert advisors, which ones to use. And the first step of that is being able to implement the code to bring those into our analysis. So let's have a look at that. And before we do, if you like this video, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. Say what you thought of the video, any questions, anything you'd like for the future. Would love to hear that in the comments. Very active on YouTube now, so please get in touch. And also, I'd like to hear your thoughts in our community. Some of you may know, we've been following for a long time. We have the website toolkitfortraders.com, where there was a forum on there, but I've recently had to suspend the forum. Unfortunately, we're just getting full of spam from companies trying to sell casino games and all kinds of stuff. So I've decided to close that down and open up a Discord channel, which everybody seems to be doing at the moment. So why not me? So if you want to join in that, the link is in the description below. On there, you'll also be able to get the source files for all the lessons here, as well as indicators and expert advisors that we'll be making as a community. You'll be able to get the PDF downloads of these presentations there as well. And you can also get all that stuff on the Toolkit for Traders website still. As well, you'll be able to, on the Discord channel, there was a channel there to submit ideas for future videos or strategies you would like me to code, anything like that. Put it down and I'll have a read through and hopefully find some time to pick them and do that. But the best way to stay in touch and where I'm most active is actually in the YouTube comments. So your best protocol is to go there. But if you want to do that and reach out and talk to other people that are interested in coding expert advisors, join the Discord channel and join the conversation there. We will have on the description for this video as well the links for the Instagram, X and TikTok, where I'll be putting on some short series that we've got planned for the channel, as well as on YouTube Shorts. You don't have to go anywhere else. You'll be able to see that on the Reels and also on TikTok as well, if that's more where you like to watch that kind of content. So we'll be looking at some things like back testing 10 years worth of candlestick data, candlestick patterns to see whether they actually work or not, and looking at some classic strategies in 60 seconds to see whether we can work out whether they work or not. But anyway, back to today's lesson. So using indicators. So we've looked at using functions and classes. Hopefully now you've got the foundations that you'll find using indicators very easy. So MQL5 comes with a number of inbuilt technical indicators, and they are accessed with their own functions that all start with the suffix I, and they include all the main ones you'd expect: your moving averages, a simple moving average, exponential moving average, those standard ones. Your RSI is listed as IRSI, your MACD, IMACD, and you've got your fractal turning points, ifractals. There is many more, and you can look at it, follow the link here for the MQL5 docs, and you'll get to the indicators page and you'll see all the indicators that are inbuilt. You can also open up a MetaTrader terminal and look at the indicators, so load up the indicators on there. They're all inbuilt to MQL5, so you can use any of those that are standard in there. You can also load into MQL5 any custom indicator you might have downloaded from the internet somewhere or written yourself, and we will look at that later in this series about how you would do that. So MQL5 handles indicators differently than what you may be used to if you've been using MQL4. So we'll look at this step by step so you get a full grasp of how that works. So the first thing we look at is we have a variable that we create, which is an integer type, and we give our variable the name. So in this case, we're using the MACD indicator with the iMACD. And so we've called it the MACD handle. Now, why have we called it the handle? Well, this function here, iMACD, in MQL4, this would have returned a double, which is the actual number of the number that the indicator is at a specific point. So it would have given you a price or a position on the chart, and it would have returned that, and you would have taken that as a number. MQL5 is different. It holds the indicator as an object because we're an object-orientated programming language here. So what we actually get back from there is an integer called a handle, and the handle is like a ticket number that you would get from an order if you put an order in. It's a number, a unique number that refers to your indicator. So when you go back to use the indicator again, you're not having to instantiate a whole new version of that indicator and run all the code again. It will just pull back the object so you can refer to that object every time you use it. So we need to create then a variable and give it a name so that we can remember what it is. We then need to use the inbuilt function iMACD, which is the name for the moving average convergence divergence indicator on MQL5. We then we have to put in the symbol that is being used. So in this case, as an example, I've used the EURUSD. That's a string variable, so we need to put in between double quotes. We've then got the time frame input, which used an integer, but it's actually enumerated to make it easier. In this case, I've used period M15. You could also use period current to use the current time frame that the chart is on. You've got H4, D1, and various in between that you can all look at in the enum time frame section of the MQL5 docs. So you put in that period time frame. It's fairly simple, and we'll look at that on the charts in a bit. And then we need to give the input parameters. Now, these vary depending on the indicator. MACD has 3 for the two moving averages that you're measuring the difference between, and then also the third input for the smoothing factor to get your signals for. And then finally, you need to put which price data you want to use for your indicator to its analysis. So typically we would use the close price. That's pretty standard, but you can use the open price, you can use the median price, you can use the typical price. And again, an explanation of those is in the MQL5 docs. And if you look at enum applied price, Google that, and it will bring up the MQL5 docs for that. So as we said, MQL5 is different from MQL4. It will return a handle rather than a double for the number. So you might be asking then, well, how do we get the numbers from the indicator? Because in the previous case, it returned the number from the indicator, which you could then compare and execute your trades from there. But in order to get the data from the indicator for MQL5, we need to use another function to say which buffer we want to use and then get the data from that buffer into an array that we can then compare. All sounds very complicated, but let's go through that step by step. So if we were going to use an indicator, we would at the start, as we just explained, we would create our handle. We would create our indicator object, store the handle so that we can refer back to it. We then create a double type, and we're actually creating an array here. So we've given the array a name, which in this case is MACD main, and this is going to store our main signal from the MACD, the main line. Then we're doing an array, so we've got the square brackets as we covered in the loops and arrays lesson. And we're not put any data in there just yet, but this is just a placeholder at the moment that we're going to store our data in. We then need to do something special with the array. So when you normally have an array and you start at the 0 index and then you add data to it, you would add data then at number 1 index, number 2 index, number 3 index, and so on. That's fine for many scenarios, but in the case of price data where we're looking at time, we want the most recent data to be at the very front of the list. So as in when new data comes in, instead of it being at the back of the queue, we want it to be at position 0 and then move everything else back one space every time the new data comes in. So that we call that array a series, and we have to tell MQL5 that we want this array to act as a series where the newest data comes in at the start rather than at the end. And you'll see I'll put an image on here from the MQL5 docs where you can see that the data that comes in, the direction of the x-axis is reversed when it's set as a series, so that the most recent data is displayed at the front rather than at the back as it would in a normal list that we might have. So we tell the system, we use the inbuilt function array set a series to do this. We then tell the system that we want it to do it on the MACD main array that we've just made, and we say set it to true. So we can actually reverse this by setting it to false if we wanted to reverse the order of our array. So we're going to set it to true, and then it understands that that is now a series. Then we need to use a second inbuilt function, which is copy buffer. And what copy buffer does is it's going to take as an input, we're going to give it the handle so it knows the indicator that we want the data from. And we are then going to say which buffer we want to use. So some indicators, and I will explain this a bit more in a moment, so don't worry if you're not following just yet. Some indicators have more than one line. The MACD is a good example of that. You'll have the main MACD line, and then you'll also often have like a smoothing line with the histogram. So sometimes the main line is displayed as a histogram, sometimes it's just a line. It doesn't really matter how it's visualized. It's just a series of numbers in a series. So the visualization doesn't matter. But in the case of MACD, we have two lines because one of the main line is then smoothed with the 9-period moving average in this case, so that it lags the main line, and then we can get signals from there. So we have to tell the system which line we want. So in the MACD, 0 refers to the main line, and 1 refers to the signal line. So if we look at the MACD here, just to explain that again, you can see I've actually got and it may be not that clear here, so don't worry. Hopefully it will be. But we've got the red line, which is one fast-moving exponential moving average, and we've got a blue line here, which is a slower moving average. Now the MACD uses those two and compares the difference, and it compares the difference and plots it as this histogram, which you can see over here. Now this histogram is just a series of numbers in a list, in an array that has been set as a series that we're then copying. The red dash line here is a smooth version of the green line and lags that. And so that follows it and allows us to get some signals from that. Otherwise, we'd have to set static thresholds, which don't work so well for MACD. So we have this smooth line, which gives us some triggers that we can compare the data either side of these lines and get us some signals to go long or to go short. So you can see here the green histogram, which is the way it's displayed in the standard MetaTrader, is on the 0 buffer, and the red dash line is on the 1 buffer. So when we're copying that buffer and we want the main line, we need to set that variable to 0. If we wanted the signal line, which was the red dash line in the previous example, we would set that to be 1. We could create a different array called MACD signal. The name doesn't matter, but obviously use a name that makes sense to us. We then tell the the terminal that we want to set that array to series because it's an indicator and it needs to work most recent data at the front. So we're going to copy that information using the second buffer. If you're using other indicators, you can have more than 2 buffers. In fact, you can have 512 buffers. So I worry about you if you have 512 buffers in an indicator you've made, how long that would have taken, but there we go. One of the challenges of using third-party indicators is it's not always clear which buffer is which, and sometimes it takes a bit of detective work to figure that out. Most indicators will only use 1 or 2. In the case of something like the Ichimoku Kinko Hayo, which many of you will be familiar with, it has 5 buffers. You've got the Tenkan Sen on 0 through to the Chikou span on the 5th, marked as the number 4 index on that buffer. So you could pull all of those from the single handle and you just select the different buffers when you do that. So we've covered a lot of things there. We're going to go to the MetaEditor now, and we'll do a practical example of using a indicator in our expert advisor to change the text to give us a signal to go long or to go short. And hopefully that will make more sense of what we've been looking at in the slides so far. Okay, so we're back into the MetaEditor now. Carrying on from what we did in the last lesson, which was to add the volume data to our chart so that we could get a better idea of how the volume was changing. So in this lesson, we're going to look to add an indicator to our expert advisor, so we get a signal that comes from the technical analysis from that indicator. In this example, we're going to use a really simple indicator, which is the momentum oscillator, which is inbuilt into MetaTrader. So nice and easy to use. It is a single buffer indicator, so there's only one line to look at. So that makes things nice and easy for us. And it will just give us a feel for how to use indicator data in our expert advisors. We're not going to take any orders. We're not going to do any back testing just yet. That is going to come. We're going to cover a lesson on sending orders to the terminal in the next lesson, I think. So we'll just look at how we can get that data from the indicator, how we can use that to give us some more useful information. And we're slowly building up on the usefulness of our expert advisor to get to the point where we've got a really robust and good expert advisor that is useful, but that crucially you understand as well. So let's go over to the editor. We'll save this as, and we'll save this as number 8. So we keep our progress from the last lesson. So we have our spread checker, we have our volume data down here. We can leave that all alone. What we're going to do now, actually we're going to do it here just under the inputs, is we need some inputs for our momentum indicator. So we're going to create those. So we get input, and the first one we need is a period for the momentum indicator. So we're going to call that momentum period, and that it will be an integer. I think the standard for the momentum indicator is 14 periods. Don't ask me why, but we'll just go with that as a default. Obviously, we've set this up as an input, so we will be able to change it. We'll put a comment after this because that will actually show in the terminal, which I'll show you in a moment. We'll have a second one, which is a threshold. This will be used to generate the signals about whether we're in a long or short position, and we'll use a double for this because we'll be comparing with the data returned from the indicator, which will also be a double, so that makes the most sense. So we'll have the threshold for signals, and then finally we'll have an input for the applied price. So we mentioned the applied price there, so we can use the applied is an enum. We can type in enum applied price with the underscores between the words, and the helper inside the MetaEditor platform will bring up the ones that are there. So we want the applied price. It is an integer, but it's got a second layer to make it easier to understand, where each integer has been assigned a name. We'll give this momentum price as the name, and then we'll set this to be price. So you can see if I type in price all capitals, we've got all the options built into MetaEditor here, which we can use. So we can use the high, the low, the median, the open, the typical, and the weighted, and all of that is in the document. So if you want to see more, type in price underscore close like that, press F1, and you can actually bring up the document for that, and it will tell you what those enums are and what kind of price they're looking at. So you could use the weighted price, the typical price. But what we've actually done here is we've set this as an input, so we can change this when we have loaded up our expert advisor. So that's why we've done it as an input. Okay, so we've created our input variables that we will need. So that's going to be really useful as we go down the page and we look to do that. One thing I want to put just while we do this that we didn't do in the last lesson, but when you remove the indicator, what you might have noticed is that the information stays on the screen and doesn't disappear. So we need to do one thing to our expert advisor to make sure that goes again, and we use the comment function that we've used, and we'll set it to just a blank string, so that when we de-initialize, when we on de-init, so when we remove the indicator, this code block will be executed, and we will just say clear the comments, so there's nothing on the screen distracting us. One thing I forgot to do in last lesson, but there we go. Okay, so now we're on to using the indicator. So I'm going to carve out a little section in our code to pop that at the top here. So we're going to say our indicator section, and the first thing we need is we need to have an array that we can put our data into. So we're going to create an array called momentum. We'll create it with the square brackets to say to the compiler that this is an array and not just a simple variable. And we need to set that array to be back to front. So we'll go array set as series, so that why is that not coming up? Array set as series. We tell it which array we want, which is the momentum array we've just had, and we say we do want it to be back to front with the most recent data at the front of the queue. So we set that to true. Good, so we've set up our array to hold our data. Now we need to get the indicator, so the way we do that in the untick function is we create the int and we get the handle from the indicator. So we have a momentum handle, and then we say the momentum handle is going to take the handle of the I momentum. So you can see here we've got the momentum indicator, which is going to take a string symbol, an enum time frame, a period, an applied price, or a handle if you wanted to apply that to another indicator. So we'll do that. We'll say we want it to be on the current symbol, we want the current period, and we want the period that we've set up as in our input. So we can choose the momentum period here, and we also want the price that we've selected in our input, so momentum price. Okay, so now we've loaded up the function for the momentum indicator. We've put the handle into our momentum handle variable, and now we can use the copy buffer function to put that data into our momentum array that we created. So it might sound a bit convoluted, but it will all come good once you've done this one or two times, which is why I say that you should do this yourself, give it a go, get a practice, get a feel for doing it. So this is just a single buffer indicator, so we only need the 0 buffer, which is the first one and the only one in this case. And then there's two other inputs which we need to put in, which I didn't cover in the presentation, but the first thing is the start position. So where in the indicator do we want the information from? The start position at 0, which we'll put in, is the most recent data. So it's the furthest right on your chart. So we want that as the first bit of information. As information on each tick is coming in your momentum indicator is moving up and down with price, we want that information. And then we say how many numbers back do we want? And in this case, we're going to go 3. So we'll have the most recent, the second most recent, and the third most recent piece of information. That's useful for if you're comparing things like gradients, where you want to know the second and third most recent. Typically, you don't want the one that the most recent data, because price is still going up and down and the bar is still forming. Quite often you only want to take that data once the bar is formed, completed, and you've got the finished close price. So that's why we get 3, so we can get the most recent close bar and then the one before that if we want to do any comparison for gradients. Okay, so we've said we want to copy the information from the momentum indicator. We've said we want it from the 0 buffer, from 0 to the third bit of information. And last of all, we say, where do we want to put this information? Well, we want to put it into our momentum array. So we'll do that. And then lastly, what we're going to do, and this is just for convenience, is we're going to say we want to get the current momentum on its own. So we'll take the current momentum, we'll create a variable to hold the current momentum, and we're going to say get the most recent from the 0 position on there. So that's the most recent number in our array, which is going to be the furthest right, the current state of the momentum indicator. So now that's it. We've got our information from our indicator. We now need to do something with that data to make it useful. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another message to our comment. So we're going to change, change the message depending on the state of the indicator. So what we want to do is we're going to create a string variable, and it's going to hold our indicator message. And we're going to set that initially as blank because we don't have anything to put in it just yet. We're going to change our input depending on what the indicator is doing. So we're going to use an if operator, and we're going to say, right, compare the current momentum to the momentum threshold, which we put in our right at the top. We put a 0. So if you don't know the momentum indicator, it oscillates above and below 100. Above 100 it is supposed to show positive momentum, upward momentum, and below 100 is negative momentum. So we want to compare that to the momentum threshold, which we've got set as 100. And if the momentum indicator is above 100, we're going to set our indicator message to this. We will say price momentum is positive, go long. Okay. If the indicator is below the threshold, we're going to say something else. So we're going to say price momentum is negative, go short. So we now have an if and else block, which is looking at whether the current momentum is above or below the momentum threshold. If it's above it, we're going to change the message to go long. If it's below it, we're going to change the message to go short. So that's all we need to do at this stage. Obviously, you can see if you wanted to take trades on this, you could replace this indicator message with the execution for a trade, which we'll cover in future lessons. So we're building up to that point. So let's compile that, see if I've put any errors in, and I haven't, which is lovely. So we'll go now to the terminal, and I've already loaded up the momentum indicator on this chart set to a 14 period. So currently momentum indicator is at 99.74, very close to the 100 mark, but it is below. So when we load up our expert advisor, we should get a message saying go short. So let's see that. So we'll load up here. We have our inputs here. And you can see where I put the comment, where momentum period threshold applied price, that has now changed as text. Whereas on the max spread, where I haven't put a comment message after it, that's just the name of the variable. So that's just something you can do to make your expert advisor more readable. But we have this set up with our 100 threshold, our momentum period there, our close price, and we could change that if we wanted to any of the enumerated prices in MQL5. But we're just going to leave that as closed for now. We'll click OK, and we should get a message in. We haven't, and that's because I've made a mistake. So we're missing out one last thing. So let's go back to the editor. we've created our indicator message, but we haven't yet added it to our message. So what we're going to do is after the volume message, we're going to do string add. We're going to choose the message string. We're going to add something to it. First, I want to add a new line so that it's nice and readable. In fact, I'll put 2 new lines in there. And we'll do another one, which is to add our indicator message. So we put into the indicator, into the message string, add the indicator message. We'll do that, save that and compile. No errors. So let's go back to the terminal. And here we go. So let me see if I can change there we go. So if you look at the top left here, we've got price momentum is negative, go short. So that price is currently 99, momentum is currently 99.74. So we've got below 100 and it's telling us that we should go short. Now, if we want, we can just test that out to see if that works. So if we put this to 90 and press OK for the threshold, now you can see price momentum is positive. Obviously, that's just to test that the if and the else function works. That's not what we would use because that's the momentum indicator almost never goes that low. So we'll go back to that, change that back to 100, and then again it will show go short when the first tick comes in. And you can see now we've got a signal that is coming from our indicator in our expert advisor, which is good progress. Very last thing, we're going to remove the expert advisor here, and you'll see that we've put that comment, that blank comment in, so all that information goes, which is nice and tidy. So I hope you found that useful and informative, and you started to grasp how to use indicators in your expert advisor. If you want to follow along, and I really recommend you do, all the source code will be on the website in the new Discord channel. So go on there to download that if you want to follow along. Load up a MetaEditor and type it out yourself and have a go at making the expert advisor. Come across the problems, try and fix the problems. It's the best way to learn. So follow along the video, watch again, and give it a go yourself. In the next video, we'll be looking at placing our first order. So this is when it starts to get really interesting. We're actually going to use the signal from our expert advisor and the technical indicator to create a buy or sell signal. We're going to learn how we're going to keep hold of our order tickets, and we're going to look at closing the orders, and there will be a problem that will be deliberately put in to the expert advisor will be creating. And I'll leave that as homework at the end of that lesson for you to try and figure out before the next lesson comes out the week after, because it's all part of the learning process. So if you have any questions, drop it in the comment section below, or if you want to contact me, this is the best to worst order to do it. Drop it in the comment section and I will answer the question there. Or you can ask the questions in Discord forum. I'm fairly active on that. Or you can reach out to me direct on Instagram, X, or TikTok. All the links are in the description below. But the best way to do it is on the YouTube comment section. I don't respond to DMs as much on the social media platforms. So your best bet is to go for the YouTube comments, or if it's more depth that you want to look at and you want to see what other people are saying about it, go on to the new Discord forum as well. But that's all for this lesson. Have a good day and enjoy your coding.